All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Let me see if I can get everything up on the screen here. No, not that. There we are. No. Yes. Okay. There we are. Anyway, good morning again. I'm Jan Erickson from Stepping Aside, and welcome to Somewhat Daily Tarot and Rune. While we get going here on Wednesday, the 4th day of September 2019. Well, so as we've talked before, we have an energy of 9 here for the month. That's completion. A 4 is structure and foundation and elemental balance. So we start the day off at least with the numerology of the day. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you come back, thank you so much. If you haven't clicked subscribe yet, I'd love you to do that. And check out my blog, Stepping Aside, over at imsteppingaside.com. The Wednesday correspondences are up for today, and we'll go over a little bit of that here before we get started. And while I shuffle a little bit, if it is your first time here, I'm going to do at least 3 cards, maybe 4, just depends on the spread itself and how I feel about it. And then I'm going to pull a rune from the Elder Futhark out of my rune bag, and then I'm going to create a geomancy rune. So we're going to get a lot of information here today, and we're going to begin, though, with some Wednesday correspondences. One of the things I wanted to mention, well, we're still in Scorpio. It doesn't move again until, what about a little after 8, I think, tonight? 8:09 p.m., at least my time. It'll move into Sagittarius. So right now we're still in kind of an emotionally intense day, perhaps. Emotions are in flux. They could be high. Scorpio energy can be really focused, but it can also be pretty secretive. So if you feel like there's something going on there, where something's happening behind the scenes or something, then it may very well be. So you might want to just sort of be aware, just in case. But there was one thing, especially, if you're working magic or if you're working on inner work, doing some inner work with Chiron. Is Chiron still in? Yeah, Chiron's still in retrograde. But the other thing we have today, Chiron is the focus of a yod. A yod is something that happens between, it's an aspect or a pattern that happens between 3 planets or planetary bodies. And today, Chiron is in a yod with Pallas and Juno. Now, Pallas is an asteroid that talks more about strategy and reason and things like that. And then Juno, of course, is about relationships. And so how we strategize in our relationships, those two are in sextile, so they're agreeing with one another. The others are and they're it's either called being in conjunct, not in conjunct, but in conjunct, one word, or quincunx, which is another weird name for it, but you can almost get in trouble saying it if you're not careful. Anyway, a lot of people won't even use it, but anyway, probably for that reason. But anyway, those are the ones, they don't understand each other. So Pallas and Juno don't really interact. It's not that they don't interact well. I mean, they can. They kind of provide the impetus for what Chiron's going to do, but they don't really understand each other. So Pallas and Juno don't understand Chiron and vice versa. So Chiron is in conjunct with both Pallas and Juno and creating a yod with Chiron as the focus. So the focus means that's where the work is going to get done, right? And then the other just sort of gives it a little bit of a foundation, kind of tells you what the focus is going to be about. And with Chiron, you're talking wounds, old wounds. And so Chiron's the wounded healer. And the idea behind Chiron is not to just simply embrace them, necessarily. You want to embrace them long enough to look at them, right? And then you want to move on and move past them. And so, it sounds like, Chiron's going to have a little help with that today. So if you want to work magic, you can sort of focus it on something like that, something to do with that. Healing wounds and things like that. Today's a Wednesday, so you're looking at Mercury energy, so communication and reason and strategy. So it's going to align well with, certainly with Pallas's influence there. So anyhow, you might communicate with yourself and get past some old wounds today involving relationships and how we strategize within them. So how we engage with our partner. whether or not, with the Scorpio influence, you might want to worry about maybe being manipulative. So, maybe, in fact, maybe even today, Chiron might interact with that a little bit, and maybe Scorpio's intensity will actually help stimulate some of that. So I don't know. Scorpio can work for or against you. It's nice when it works for you, but a lot of energy there, and it's not always out front. Sometimes it is, they're very diligent workers, very focused on what they're doing, but at the same time, there can be a lot of behind the scenes stuff happening that you don't know about. So anyhow, that's enough of that. Anyhow, let's go ahead and get started and take our first card. Now that we know, oops, well, I threw two of them down, so let's see what they are. Oh, okay, so one of them is one of them's the Lovers. So here we have the Lovers. I threw that one down. We'll put that back. And I also threw down the Hierophant. So I'm throwing down, onto the floor soul archetype cards today. So Spirit's saying she's being flagrant again. My mother used to say that. She would not that I'd be flagrant. Well, I can't think of the word she used to use. I know she used to call me a flibberty gibbet because I talked a lot. That's an old term, by the way, older than me even. Although I think it was mentioned in a Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks movie, and I don't know if it was the one where she was the bookstore keeper. Is that the one? I don't know. Anyway, or it might have been, I don't know, it might have been something else. Was it in the one where Sleepless in Seattle maybe? I don't know. Anyway, it was one of the two, but I think it was a Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks movie was where I heard that. I thought, oh my God, been there. I was always flighty though, very flighty. A lot of, strange energy, when you're an empathic child, that's another thing. I was not just born a witch, I was born an empath. And when you're empathic as a child, also if you're a witch, you just don't see anything the same way other people do anyhow. But if you're an empath, you're just emotionally everywhere, right? And you get very distracted. Either that or else I would have a very, very strong focus. I did that too. So if I was reading, you couldn't get me out of it. You'd have to shake me. I had a 6th grade teacher that told my mother at a parent-teacher conference that you have a wonderful daughter here. She's very smart. She makes A's. She's doing very well in my class. The only thing that I've noticed is that if she's reading, if we're reading, I give the class some time for reading, and they're reading quietly to, not talking to anybody. You have to go and shake her to get her out of the book. Otherwise, she can't come back. So my mom just laughed. She says, yeah, that's right. She was always amused when teachers would see things in me that she did. So that was kind of interesting. But anyway, let's draw our first card and see where we are today. And because I like to do this randomly, and other readings I don't, I just lay cards out, into a spread of some kind. But for this purpose, I want it to be really random. So I take the 13th card. I was born on the 13th, and it comes up in my life constantly. So it just seems like the natural number to count to. But here we have the 3rd card of the Major Arcana, a 3 energy, and it's the Empress. She is basically the result of the Magician and the High Priestess, all of that energy coming together into creation. And she is the creation principle. I love her crown. She's influenced by spirit. You can see the stars there. There's fertility around her. You see the shield with Venus, the glyph for Venus on it. Let's see what's on her gown. It looks like roses, isn't it? One of the flowers for Venus. But she's the Earth Mother. She's the Mother Principle, and you see what you have here. It's interesting because you have, in a sense, a male-dominated energy, if you believe the picture on the magician. If you believe the magician is a male energy, which it likely is, and then you have the high priestess, which is the feminine divine. You have the alchemical presence and the feminine divine, right? Where you're bringing, spirit is now forming, bringing what the magician did. All of it's coming together in balance, and it's forming the empress, right? The high priestess goes down through the abyss, basically, into form on the Kabbalistic tree of life. Anyhow, and that's very interesting. If you can ever, I'll do one. I have one actually. Did I photocopy it? I may have, and I'll show it to you. I showed it to you guys once before, but it's the tarot put on the tree of life, and it's just amazing how the Hermetic folks do that. But anyway, that's another thing to try to locate. I'll try to find mine and show it to you. But if you can find one, it might be in Donald Craig's Modern Magic book. I'll have to look. But anyhow. It's just interesting how it shows the flow of the cards through the tree of life. It's just interesting if you're interested in stuff like that. But anyhow, you see all of that then resulting in the Empress. What you don't see coming first is the Emperor. So the notion of God as Father, I don't think so. The notion of God as the Creator, to me, that's a feminine influence. So I see that as the Great Mother. Actually, I see the Creator as the Great Mother. So I don't see that as God the Father. I see God the Mother. So in reality, there's no gender, but the whole notion of creating the thought and all the alchemical stuff that goes into that, and then the choice to expand and grow and go beneath and into form, that comes from the high priestess. So, and then the next card you see is the Empress. And in some decks, you'll find that the Emperor does, like in this particular one, he doesn't look you in the eye, not really. He's kind of looking down and to the left, his left, so a little bit toward the future, like he's thinking about things, coming up, and not really sure what that is, right? Whereas in other decks, you'll see him looking back at the Empress. And so the Empress is actually the governing influence here of creation. It's not the Emperor. Yes, there has to be the Great Mother, longs for something, right? For something more. And so that's where her consort is created. Another card. Well, the magician. Let's manifest something. But basically, that's what you have. You have the Empress is creating the world. You don't have it the other way around. It's not the Emperor doing that. It's the Empress. But the Empress needs a consort, and that's the Emperor. So, but make no mistake about it, there was a time when men and childbirth were not needed. So, the principle of fertility can happen electrically. So I don't know how that happened back in the day, but apparently it could. So you get islands of women and they still reproduce. And are they going and capturing men? Maybe, but maybe not. So there's lore in that regard, if you care to look it up, see what you can find on it. But it's just an interesting thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that life begins in the same way that we think it does. So necessarily. And I suspect that's why the Empress comes first. When you get down into, below the level of spirit, I think that's probably why that happens. But here, if you got the Empress today, you're talking, fertile opportunities, fertile prospects. You're talking grace and compassion. It's a soul archetype card, mind, body, spirit balance. It's a catalytic card, being a 3 energy. And so we're definitely, it's all about manifestation. But the manifestation, we want to manifest beauty and love and joy and partnership and happiness and alignment, basically. So it's a very good way to start our Wednesday out. Let's do another card. Well, I just can't keep them at all. So that's the 5th card. It's the 6 of swords. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I'll try to do it that way and maybe not be so rowdy with it. Well, here we have the 11th card of the major arcana. We have the soul archetype card of justice. Oh boy, justice and the Empress. Well, you know, right now we have an 11 energy, so we aren't going to reduce that to 2. 11 is a master number for illumination, so we've definitely got some soul issues here. One of the things that we talk a lot about here, and it actually has to do with ascension, is the fact that we are indeed souls focused into these bodies, that we are not the bodies we inhabit, we are not the personality. Excuse me. The transitory aspect of self is the body and everything about that, the ego, the personality, the emotions that we have, the judgments we make, all of that is all ego-based. It's not based on spirit. And part of the ascension work that we do here, it isn't just about where we're going to end up, but it's also about the work that we do here and seeing ourselves, viewing ourselves as spirit inhabiting the bodies actually helps to make that shift into that awareness. If you don't already know that, you are. You're the creator manifested into form. You're the great mother manifested into form, or you could view yourself as the children of the great mother. But in fact, you are that energy, that loving energy expressed into form. The creator just decided, I want to know more about what life in form might be. You know, I'm not just going to sit here as this, you know, free-floating, you know, energy thing, you know, point of light or whatever. Want to know more about things. And so breathed out the life and we rest in the great mother's breath, as they say. And that's the universe. That's all that we are. So if you believe all that is actually all that is, then that's all this is, right? And that's all we are. The point of ascension is to start working with that knowledge and that information, and to start allowing ourselves to see through the eyes of source vision instead of the eyes of the ego, so that we can make better choices in terms of how we see one another. The isms that we see so much right now that are so awful, those will just go away because we won't see one another that way anymore. Instead of seeing the other, we'll see the other side of self. And that's a wonderful thing to see, you know, the whole notion, there but for the grace of God go I. Well, that's the truth. And what that actually means, sure, it means that you might be making a different choice, of course, and you're not acting that way. But at the same time, or they're having troubles, you know, and oh, there but for the grace of God go I. You know, God protected me. Well, no, not really. But that's not how that actually works. But the fact is that you're seeing something you could be doing, right? You could be experiencing. You could be offering the world. It could be part of you, but because you see through source vision, you have a little bit different orientation, maybe. Although we have to be careful when we get into the notions of good and bad, because that's also judgment. And in spirit, we don't do that. You know, we know what feels right and what doesn't, what seems to be the right thing and what isn't. But from the soul perspective, what we experience here, no matter how heartbreaking it might be, no matter what it is, you know, it's just something to experience. We don't attach any significance to it until we get into form. And then all of a sudden, you know, ego takes over and we're reacting all over the place and judging everything as one thing or another, when in truth, they're really just something to experience. Yes, they do have a quality to them, and it's not that we can't acknowledge that and make decisions surrounding it. We just have to be careful how much we get caught up in that focus. If it's something that's not worthwhile, then you need to move on to something that is. That's sort of the way that is. You experience what you need to and go find something else to do, basically. So that's how the soul sees it, essentially. Let's do a third card. It might be our last one. We'll see. See if we get another major card. Mercury rules today. Thoth is another one. Hermes, they're all the different names for Mercury. I assume they're the same person. But the Mercury energy is planetary. They're thinking, in this case, it's thinking planetary Mercury. But Mercury also represents one of the 7 sacred planets, I believe, and that's I think they're one of the 7 sacred planets, isn't it? I think Mercury is. Anyway, well, sure, because it's because of Mercury and Hermes, who's one of the seven sacred planets. Well, it's also one of the seven so-called gods, but that's not what they are. They're actually well, Thoth was likely an extraterrestrial that was here, and Hermes might have been too, but Hermes and Mercury may be more referring to the rays that are coming through. So I don't know on that one, but Thoth was here. So, or Toth, however you want to pronounce it. Some people say tot. They don't, the TH on both ends is just said as a T. So tot or tote. That's another way I've heard it pronounced. Who knows? Until he comes back, we're not going to be able to ask him, right? So anyhow, here we have the King of Cups. So I'm going to say then that this reading has to do, we're going to put this within the center, and we're going to move the cards around, which you can do, by the way. So we're going to put the King of Cups in between the Empress and Justice. Actually, we're going to put the King first, because we're going to have him look at the Empress. All right. The King of Cups sits on the water, literally floats on the water. He's got a chalice in one hand, his right hand, denoting cups and the water element and our emotions. He's not looking us in the eye, though. Look at that. He's looking toward the future. Now, when he's right with himself, he's somebody that, I mean, you're talking about a male energy or a male presence, because this could apply to a woman as well. You know, if you're somebody who's got a strong personality or what have you, a person in authority, you know, I mean, it could be a strong presence and you could be a woman here, but typically we're talking about a male person in authority. Cups being emotions, you're talking about someone who could be very generous and compassionate and intuitive. But the other side of this man is that he's passive aggressive. And unfortunately, all too often with this energy, that's what comes out. Here, we have the perfect example. That's why I moved it. He's looking at the Empress, isn't he? So, what the King of Cups, what this is telling us here today is that this individual, if it's you, if it's you're just expressing this energy of authority, or that's more dominant, you know, being male, more projective, versus the receptive side, which is considered the queen or what have you, the female energy. However, in receptiveness is great power. So that is where the actual power of the universe lies. It does not lie in male energy. It lies in the ability of the feminine energy to balance, to bring everything to balance. That's what he's looking toward the Empress because he needs her for balance. You'll find a lot of men that are outward in their expression, you know, maybe they're explosive, maybe they're volatile, maybe they rise to the occasion, but it doesn't have to be negative either. It could be that they have a lot of energy and they rise to the occasion, and they get carried away, or you know, it could be anything like that. But they look to the woman to balance them. I knew one guy, if his wife got around him, it got worse, and she'd have to leave, and then he'd calm down, because it was almost like he was putting a show on for her. And so you see that expression of maleness in relation to the femaleness, and the femaleness is typically the balancing presence. And so for the King of Cups, you know, he's in that wishy-washy, passive-aggressive, you know, living at both extremes kind of experience. The Empress comes in and calms that down. So that's what that's saying to us today, that we want to bring our emotions into balance. And also, we want an eye on justice here. We want to have spirit inform all of it. Again, justice is, again, about balance, isn't it? I don't know if I pulled this up. I don't know if I just threw it down. Did I ever show it? I don't even remember now. Or maybe I did it briefly. Now, here's an interesting thing. I can't tell if the pillars here and here are part of his throne, because it kind of looks like the drape behind him, if that's what that is attached to them. But we have Lady Justice. You see the sword is pointed straight up to spirit. It's not, all over the place. We see the scales in the left hand, balancing in the receptive hand, and the strength of the sword in the right. Speaking truth to power is another issue with this. Here's the thing. Sometimes these, sometimes and I'm going to stop with just this and do a rune, but sometimes these cards, what they will do is I mean, this may be something that's happening in our lives, but I have a feeling this is more societal. So, you know who the king is then, don't you? Yeah, that guy. I try not to say his name, and his last name is also another name for the major arcana, and I don't use it now, and I never will again. Ever, 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 ever in my whole life will I ever say that word in context with the tarot. I just won't. It will defile it if I do. Anyhow. Well, there we have it, don't we? All Ye's. If you've been here before, All Ye's is the 15th rune of the major, or not the major, the Elder Futhark. I'm in the tarot mode still. We see 3 branches pointing to spirit. It represents the elk. This is the rainbow bridge to consciousness, actually. We have fire, air, and water at the top and earth at the bottom. We have small kenaz, expressions of kenaz here. I'll show you that. I'll draw it for you. It's not too terrifying, I promise. I'm best at stick figures, so I'm really, really good at runes. So anyway, so this is All Ye's. Okay. Now you see up at the top, this is kenaz, and this is the torch. This is spirit lighting outward. But you can see that it's up here as well, isn't it? So we've got, spirit funneling in or going up. So it's really an as above, so below rune. And with its presence, it really, I think it reinforces at minimum the 11 of justice. I think that it definitely does that. What we have in the government at this time, and maybe over in England as well, I have to tell you, I don't know if you guys saw this yesterday, if any of you are from England and you know about it, what happened in Parliament yesterday was just amazing. And this Boris Johnson guy, who's very similar to the guy we have, I guess, and that's what they say, he's a little nutty, apparently. He's wanting to do some really interesting things, and they're not letting him. And so he's lost his majority, and this one guy, who I guess was Winston Churchill's grandson, crossed the aisle and voted with, the liberals, I guess. I don't know how that's structured over there. But it seems like the white nationalistic attitude of this guy, I don't know, isn't necessarily going to play any better than it's playing here in this country. And what you have are people that maybe are making decisions from a place of ignorance. That's what we have in this country. They're making decisions from the place of ignorance. They look in terms of only how much money can someone make. And anytime you do that, all you have is greed, and everyone else is going to suffer because only a certain number of people are going to benefit from that, right? Well, it's like the Brexit vote. Apparently, people began regretting it, I read. Although I'm sure there are some people that still feel that you need to leave the European Union if that's what that's all about. But here's the thing, and this is something we need to think about. The King of Cups in this reading, being passive-aggressive, is capable of stirring up trouble, right? Is capable of stirring up conflict and trouble and all kinds of things, and it's never based on the truth. So it's like you have to ask yourself, when these things happen in society where you feel this energy moving in one direction and everybody's on board with this great new thing that they want to do, that's all well and good, but sometimes you have to ask, where did it begin? Did it begin from the standpoint of manipulation, or did it begin from the standpoint of really something that needs to happen that, it's like when women got the right to vote, when the Equal Rights Amendment was passed. These were things that there was a groundswell for all of it, right? The men didn't want it, but there was a groundswell. And the bottom line here is that sometimes change happens because of that. And so you can look to that and you can say, okay, nobody's trying to manipulate for their own nefarious purposes. But when you see a societal change, as big as the one that the UK is experiencing, and as big as the one that we're experiencing, you have to ask yourself, and I can't even speak to the thing that's happening in the UK. I don't know. But it just seems like something doesn't feel right about it to me. And I don't know why, because I don't know enough about it. But something doesn't feel right about it. It didn't feel right when it happened. It's like, wait a minute, did anybody really know what was going on here? Because it seemed like you had people that were running for office that were pro the Brexit, and but then later it's like, yeah, I didn't know what that was. I didn't know. Are you kidding me? And it mirrored perfectly what was going to be happening in this country. The parallels are remarkable. So when you see a reading like this and you see the King of Cups, and it clearly can indicate the person in supposedly in charge in our country, and you start looking at the things that he's doing, what he's doing to migrants on the border, no flu shots, no nothing, so that there's 900 cases of mumps down there. The flu could get into epidemic proportions. The things, now they've backed off on sending home sick kids, kicking them out of the country, where if they go back, they die. Something is wrong here. And it's this guy. Or it's whoever's behind this guy that's manipulating this guy, and this guy's just there for his own lark purposes, right? Whatever this is, because he doesn't seem real intact anymore, does he? And I'll bet you he wasn't when he started. So, this is not something his family didn't know about, but they let him do it anyway. Yeah. Part of the Empress is protection. It's the mother principle. Sometimes, when your parents get ill, you have to be the mother, you have to be the parent. Sometimes the role shifts, Eventually the child parents the parent, It's something that I think some kids have a hard time understanding, that when you become an adult, and some parents don't get it either, you have to be able to shift a little bit how you relate to one another. And parents then have to take a back seat. They can't, sit and give an opinion about everything that their kid's doing, because kids don't want to hear it when they're adults. It's their life. They're sharing it with you. So you have to kind of be careful, what you say, right? But eventually, the parents get older and they begin needing maybe a little help from the kids. And so hopefully, the kids will recognize that. And they will understand that now it's not that they become the parent, but that the relationship has a little better level of, more even level maybe of reciprocity, maybe. And then later on, when your parents are really old and they need to have decisions made for them, then that's when the parenting aspect comes in. So the roles shift, right? But here, the King of Cups doesn't have an Empress to look at. Not really. Even though he's trying to look at her, he really doesn't have one. There's no driving force there of equanimity and balance in his life. And there is no one who's willing to assist him with it. Because whoever is at the real heart of what's going on, because it isn't this guy, whoever's in control really needs him to be as nutty as possible so that they can get whatever they want done. All right? But we have issues of justice here, and balance and reason and fair play. And this is what needs to be driving our decisions and the decisions of this man. But it's not possible. It's simply not humanly possible. He can't do it. So consequently, he cannot look you in the eye. He lies continually, right? Anytime he looks at you, he's lying. But you watch. He says the same things over and over and over again. There's very little real content or substance to what he says. Think about it. It's all repetition. Same lines over and over and over again. The same kind of hyperbole, the same language over and over and over again. That's indicative of something. All right? Let's do a geomancy rune and see if we can tie this together. But being that this is a Wednesday and we're talking communication with all yous, we're talking spirit communication. So we're talking about listening to our inner voice. And if something doesn't seem right, do not let some guy like this tell you do not believe what you see, think, or hear in front of you. Believe only what I tell you. This guy can't look you in the eye. This guy can't stop lying. That's the last thing you want to do. You want to become the empress within and no more, no better, and express justice and balance and reason and dignity in your life and in your decisions. And if you are someone who is in a position of authority over other people, I don't know what happened to my hair. I think the last time I dropped a card, it went everywhere. All over me. Anyway, you can't see it because it's silver, I don't know. Let's see. Oh, one more thing before, gosh, should I do well, let me look at it real quick. Fire, air, water, and earth. Okay, we're looking at Puella. Puella, which is it's a female energy, young girl. So, you can get things done, it's sort of like a youthful empress before she really, got her legs under her and really understood life. But this is what it is. We have an active influence for fire, a passive for air, which is, why she's a little bit, a little bit flighty. Me, when I was young, I was Puella. Anyway, this is what it looks like. So some unstable energy there. It's almost like the king wants to do the right thing, but he literally has no idea how to get there. And whoever's controlling him isn't going to let him anyway. So maybe there are moments of clarity where he understands that, but likely not. But if this isn't having to do with our society at large, this could just be someone in your life that maybe needs to start looking to a little more feminine leadership in order to achieve balance and justice and fair dealing with other people. But this is what I wanted to say. What I think that this describes is in a sense, the solution to patriarchy. The goddess is returning. We hear that all the time, right? It's part of ascension. It's part of that awareness where we start balancing the shadow side of self with spirit, where we start understanding that we are spirit and not these bodies, and we're not the ego, we're not the personality. We're really just, spirit, just trying to have an experience here. Somewhere along the line, likely with extraterrestrial involvement, we just develop this patriarchal authority slave kind of experience with women and children as slaves, unless you were a male child, and then the men running the show. Well, I think that we've seen over the course of history that doesn't always work out well, and that without the balance of the feminine impulse there to balance things, you get assertion that turns into aggression and oppression. And pretty soon, the idea of Black people being human goes away. That's suddenly you can entertain the thought that they're not. That's what they did when they decided to enslave people from Africa. They decided that here in this country, they were 3/5 human. So they really couldn't have any real rights or privileges or anything else. But they sure could fight in wars for us, couldn't they? They were good for that, weren't they? So you see how the white male Eurocentric, if you want to call it that, attitude has affected things so dramatically over the years. And what we're seeing a lot in the cards is not only ascension-oriented kinds of things, but a return to a balance of that polarity, so that you don't have one leg of of the person being stronger than the other, so you're limping around all the time. The humanity will never go forward as it should until that balance is restored. And right now, I think what, unfortunately, as bad as it is, okay, and as alarming as it is, we're also being given a window into what we don't want anymore, okay? The idea of these people that come to Portland now. I live in Oregon. I don't understand this. I lived in downtown Portland for a while when I was going to school at Portland State. And I mean, I love downtown Portland, and I'm terrified to go there. I had someone talk to me on Twitter, one of my Twitter friends who's also from Portland, and she's like, yeah, all you got to do is just know where they're going to be and just be somewhere else and you'll be fine. So it's okay. It's not as bad. If you're there, yeah. But if you're not, you can come to Portland and do whatever you want to. And that used to be my favorite thing to do when we moved over here to Redmond, was to go back, because we live in Central Oregon, and we moved over here in 81, just after our was it 81? Yeah, our first son was born in August of 80, and we moved over here on Valentine's Day of 81. And we've been here in the same place ever since. And but I got to tell you, the most fun I would ever have would just be taking a day trip to go to downtown Portland and just look around, go shopping or go to the parks or whatever. I just loved the energy of downtown. I spent a year there I lived downtown for a year when I was at Portland State. The rest of the time I lived in Tigard. But that year that I was down there, it was just incredible. The energy of that city at that time was just amazing. The Trailblazers, the basketball team, had won the championships, and there was a big parade down Broadway. I remember when I was in college, and it was just an interesting place. So to see it turn into violence is just heartbreaking. But it's an expression of this lack of balance, polarity that we have now, where people do this grievance-based approach to everything. And with grievance-based approaches comes entitlement, you see? And then pretty soon, whatever needs to happen doesn't, and then you have all of this conflict and unrest, and that's what we've got now. Nobody's interested in talking to one another. Nobody's interested in the facts, because, of course, there are none now, are there? Because this guy says they're not. And his spokespeople say, well, no, what he says are alternative facts. No, it's either the truth or it's not. Things aren't always a matter of perspective. This is a card. There's no alternative fact to that, right? This is a Sharpie pen. No alternative fact to this, right? And yet somehow or another, we've become untethered by all of this lack of balance. And we can't even agree on what the simple truths are, This is a piece of selenite. No alternative facts here. You see what I'm saying? So I think that if this is talking about anything in your life, we're talking about unstable energy that's flitting around and flighty and the Puella. Puella is more about the King of Cups than it is about the Empress. So you can see how, even though that's a female energy technically, it can apply to a passive aggressive king because his emotions are not in balance, right? So I think with the strong presence of the major cards, and also with all these here, we're talking about soul has to guide our experiences here and let go of the ego. Maybe that's the focus of today's yod with the sextile between Pallas and Juno, strategy and partnerships. The wounding, the emotional wounding, of patriarchy is Chiron, okay? And so we now, in the skies today, we possess the energy to work past it. Same with the cards here. So cool synchronicity on this Wednesday. I think that'll do it for us today. We went a little long today. Apologies for that. I just wanted to talk about this astrology stuff, though, because I think that it's going to influence, and it's clearly influencing the reading today. So very cool. The king, he's just going to have to work it out for himself, because the rest of us, we're just going to not let him do this stuff anymore, are we? Remember to vote. It may be the only way we can deal with this. Anyhow, Thank you so much for coming by. Do check out my blog, Stepping Aside, over at I'mSteppingAside.com, and check out today's correspondences. Also, monthly tarot is up, monthly geomancy is up. That's up there as well. And I'm going to be doing a post on elemental influences on behavior. I'm starting to work on that. I've got a bunch of things I have to do today. I've got a dentist appointment tomorrow, but somewhere in there I'm going to begin that post. So look for that one as well. I'll let you know though when it comes up. It's not going to come up today, I don't think anyway, unless I just, start writing and can't stop or something. Sometimes that happens. But I don't think it will go up today, but it might. I will write this thing up though, and the video up, and put that up there. I've been doing that the last couple weeks, I guess, or maybe the last week, 2 weeks I've been doing that. Just been writing it up in case you can't get a chance to look at it or you want to refer back or something. You'll have it there on the blog as well. But I guess that's it. So we'll see you tomorrow. Be good to yourself, be good to one another, and blessed be.